Whispers of a discovery buried beneath the sands of Iraq have terrified even the bravest archaeologists. Radar scans revealed structures eerily similar to the epic descriptions of Gilgamesh's final resting place. Yet no one dares to break the seal. Why? Because what lies inside is rumored to defy history, science, and even human understanding. Could this truly be the tomb of a king who was said to be part man, part god, or is it something far more dangerous? In 2003, just before the world's attention turned to war, a German-led team carried out ground-penetrating scans near the ruins of ancient Uruk. What they uncovered shocked them. Beneath the shifting sands, shapes, emerged lines, chambers, and canal-like structures that looked less like geology and more like architecture. And then came the chilling realization. These underground formations matched the descriptions from the Epic of Gilgamesh itself. For thousands of years, scholars assumed the phrase "buried beneath the river" was poetic. But here, along an abandoned channel of the Euphrates, the scans suggested something massive, an underground complex the size of a football field. For the first time, evidence hinted that Gilgamesh, the king described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, might not have been just myth. He might have had a tomb, but instead of leading to the greatest excavation of modern history, the discovery vanished almost overnight. The German team handed their findings to Iraqi authorities, and then nothing. No official reports, no published papers, no peer-reviewed data, just a few scattered interviews with team leader Dr. Jane Farsbinder. Normally, even unfinished digs leave trails of documentation. Here, the silence was absolute. To some, it was a sign of bureaucracy tangled in war. To others, it hinted at something more deliberate. After all, why would one of the most promising archaeological discoveries in history be buried under paperwork and secrecy? Theories began to swirl. For as long as kings have been buried, legends of curses have followed. In Mesopotamia, tombs weren't just guarded with stone, but with spells and incantations. These ancient texts promised disease, madness, and divine wrath upon anyone who disturbed a ruler's rest. So when rumors spread that animals avoided the Uruk site, that sheep scattered, dogs howled, and locals fell mysteriously ill, whispers of a curse began to grow. Some even claimed inscriptions were seen, warnings of eternal guardians, and of a vessel not to be broken until the stars align once more. Whether fact or folklore, the effect was the same: fear. And that fear was about to collide with the chaos of war. As the Iraq War erupted in 2003, foreign archaeologists fled, research was abandoned, and the chance to investigate disappeared. Yet the site itself didn't vanish, was occupied. Rumors spread that US forces had taken control, sealing off the area and even removing artifacts under cover of night. Some claimed the invasion had less to do with weapons of mass destruction and more to do with ancient power buried beneath. UK. These suspicions only grew after Baghdad's National Museum was looted, with thousands of priceless Mesopotamian artifacts stolen, including the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, which resurfaced years later in the United States. To many, it was no coincidence. A legendary king's tomb discovered. A war breaks out. Priceless relics vanish. Was history being stolen in plain sight? Even without war or curses, archaeologists face enormous risks. Southern Iraq is unstable, plagued by heat, dust storms, and political tension. Excavation requires security, funding, and local trust, all in short supply. And then there's the problem of preservation. Opening a sealed chamber could mean destroying its contents instantly. Papyrus wood, even skeletal remains, can crumble to dust when exposed to air. So experts hesitate. What if the scans were misinterpreted? What if they found nothing at all? Or worse, what if they found everything and destroyed it in the process? For many, it is safer to leave Gilgamesh undisturbed. But not everyone believes he was left untouched, in hushed whispers across academic circles. A chilling story persists. Sometime in the mid-2000s, a secret team descended into the chamber. They claimed to find a massive stone sarcophagus at its center, surrounded by inscriptions that warned of trespassers. Some said the sarcophagus itself emitted a low vibrating hum. Equipment malfunctioned, batteries drained, compasses spun wildly. The texts, according to one alleged translator, spoke of a giant preserved by divine breath, a body whose heart does not decay. In other words, Gilgamesh's remains were said to be unnervingly intact, neither fully alive nor dead. Workers reportedly fell ill afterward, and one man allegedly died within weeks. No records, no photographs, just rumors. Yet the consistency of the whispers has kept the story alive. Was this evidence of advanced embalming or something stranger? The lack of official evidence has only deepened the mystery. Scholars demand transparency, skeptics dismiss the entire tale, and religious leaders warn that some doors are not meant to be opened. Meanwhile, grainy images circulate online of corridors, outlines of a sarcophagus, none rarefied, all fueling speculation. In this silence, the story of Gilgamesh's tomb has become something larger than archaeology. It has become a cultural riddle, blurring the line between legend and reality. 2 decades later, the sands of southern Iraq still hide their secret. The original scans are said to be locked away in European archives. The site itself remains sealed, and the question hangs in the air: what happens if someone dares to open it? If the tomb is real, the implications would shake the world. Proof that Gilgamesh existed. Proof that myths are not just myths. Perhaps even secrets of preservation or knowledge beyond what we can comprehend. But what if the warnings were true? What if the tomb was sealed, not to preserve history, but to keep something from escaping? Imagine it finding the tomb of a man described as 2/3 God and 1/3 human. A king whose epic predates Homer by over a millennium. A figure who battled monsters, defied the gods, and sought immortality itself. If confirmed, this would rival the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb or the Dead Sea Scrolls. It would rewrite human history and force us to confront the possibility that myth and fact were never as separate as we believed. But the discovery didn't become world news. It didn't even make it to peer-reviewed journals. Instead, it was buried first by paperwork and then by something far darker. The German team, led by Dr. Jane Fassbinder, handed their findings to Iraqi authorities. Then, silence. No excavation reports, no photographs, no official statements. Just scattered comments in interviews, carefully worded, hinting that the evidence was astonishing. Normally, archaeology thrives on transparency. Even a minor temple foundation would be catalogued, photographed, and published. But here, nothing. It was as if the discovery had been swallowed whole. Some blamed bureaucracy. Others pointed to the war. But soon, whispers spread that the silence was deliberate, that someone didn't want the tomb opened. For thousands of years, Mesopotamian kings were buried, not just with wealth, but with warnings. Ancient tablets describe curses so severe they make Egypt's curse of the pharaohs look tame. These texts promised plague, famine, madness, and divine wrath upon anyone who dared to disturb a ruler's eternal rest. So when locals began reporting strange events near the Uruk site, the whispers only grew louder. Shepherds said their flocks avoided the area. Dogs howled and refused to cross the sand. Workers fell sick with no clear cause. And then, there were the alleged inscription symbols seen on unearthed fragments that warned of eternal guardians, and a vessel sealed until the stars align once more. Was it superstition? Or was the tomb designed to project fear, just as its builders intended? As war erupted across Iraq in 2003, the German team fled. Uruk was abandoned but not unguarded. Reports claim US military forces quickly moved in, securing the area. Why would an active war zone divert troops to a patch of desert ruins? Officially, it was to protect heritage sites from looting. But skeptics argue otherwise. Some insist the invasion of Iraq wasn't just about weapons of mass destruction. It was about ancient technology buried beneath the sands. Their case only grew stronger when Baghdad's National Museum was looted. Thousands of priceless Mesopotamian artifacts vanished. Among them, The Gilgamesh Dream Tablita, 3,500-year-old cuneiform text describing visions of the great king. Years later, it surfaced in the US, illegally sold to a billionaire. Coincidence or evidence that the race to control Mesopotamia's whispers of a discovery buried beneath the sands of Iraq have terrified even the bravest archaeologists. Radar scans revealed structures matching the epic descriptions of Gilgamesh's final resting place, yet no one dares break the seal. Why? Because what lies inside is rumored to defy history, science, and even human understanding. Could this be the tomb of a king who is said to be part man, part god? Or is it something even more dangerous? Tonight, we'll uncover why this mystery has left experts pale with fear. The tomb beneath Uruk in the early 2000s, a discovery shook the archaeological world. Though most of the details never made it past whispers, scattered reports, and hushed discussions among researchers. In 2003, a German-led team operating near the ruins of ancient Uruk conducted a series of scans that would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries of modern archaeology. Led by Dr. Jörg Farsbinder, the group deployed ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers, hoping to uncover remnants of Sumerian civilization buried beneath the desert sands. What they found was nothing short of extraordinary. The instruments revealed shapes, lines, and voids beneath the surface that suggested more than simple geology. They suggested architecture, corridors, chambers, and even the traces of canal-like structures. To the astonishment of the team, these features bore a striking resemblance to passages described in Mesopotamian texts, a vast complex linked to the final resting place of Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk. The scans suggested something massive, roughly the size of a football field, and the layout echoed the descriptions of structures surrounding Gilgamesh's burial. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving piece of literature known to mankind, describes his life, his quest for immortality, and ultimately, his burial beneath the river. For centuries, historians assumed this phrasing was poetic, not literal, but the radar results suggested otherwise. The Sumerians wrote that Gilgamesh was interred beneath or near the Euphrates River itself, his tomb hidden by water and sediment. Over thousands of years, the Euphrates has shifted its course multiple times, cutting new channels and abandoning old ones. The site in question, near modern-day Walker, southern Iraq, lay along one of these ancient channels. In other words, it matched the ancient record in a way that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, there's real evidence that the king, who has long been thought of more as legend than man, might actually have had a tomb. If this continued to prove true, it would be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, as finding the resting place of King Tut, or the unearthing of Troy. It would prove that the man described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human was not merely a subject of myth, but was, indeed, a historical ruler somewhere in the real world and left behind a burial place not unworthy of his epic legacy. But, notwithstanding this largeness of the discovery, there was no excavation that followed. The German team simply handed their data to local Iraqi authorities, and that was how it all seemed to have disappeared. The official justification for this was timing. 2003, the year when Iraq went to war, and all in the region made it impossible to do more excavation work. From then onward, the country fell to chaos, and all foreign teams hustled out for their safety. But to those versed in the story, that was only part of the truth. It was reason enough to give anybody a raised eyebrow. No official report, no peer-reviewed paper, no images released. How could one of the most promising discoveries in modern history simply be abandoned? Why was there no academic record beyond interviews with Farsbinder himself? To skeptics, the absence of transparency suggested something else at work: bureaucracy, secrecy, or even fear. In archaeology, discoveries are normally documented, archived, and studied, even if excavation cannot begin immediately. In this case, all that remained were rumors and the initial statements of the team leader. As months turned into years, speculation flourished. Some suggested that Iraqi officials, overwhelmed by the invasion and looting of cultural sites across the country, deliberately sealed away the information to prevent further losses. Others believed that the find was simply too controversial, too destabilizing to the accepted historical record, to risk opening to the public. If a legendary king's tomb truly lay beneath Uruk, then what else from the ancient Sumerian texts might also prove true? But whispers soon spread that fear wasn't the only reason the site was abandoned. The curse of Gilgamesh, for as long as humans have buried their dead, they have also guarded them, with stone, with secrecy, and sometimes with fear. In Mesopotamia, this fear took on a very specific form. Unlike the Egyptian pharaohs who were often said to rest under explicit curses etched into their tomb walls, the Sumerians and Babylonians relied on protective incantations and rituals. These spells, recorded on clay tablets, invoked the gods to punish anyone who dared to disturb the eternal rest of a king. The punishment was not meant to be quick or merciful. According to these texts, intruders might face disease, madness, or divine wrath that would ripple far beyond a single person. For ordinary graves, these protections may have been modest, but for a king like Gilgamesh, half divine, half human, the barriers could have been far more severe. It was within this cultural framework that whispers of a curse surrounding the Uruk discovery began to take shape. Soon after the German team left, stories began to circulate among locals. Villagers and herders claimed that the desert surrounding the suspected tomb carried a strange energy. Some said their animals refused to cross certain areas. Sheep scattered, dogs howled at night, and birds avoided flying over the ground. These weren't isolated reports, but recurring patterns that built up over years of retelling. To those living nearby, it was a clear sign. Something beneath the sand was not meant to be disturbed. Then came the more unsettling stories, accounts of people falling mysteriously ill after approaching the area. One tale, shared second-hand among researchers, described a small group of workers who set up equipment near the site. Within days, they reported severe nausea, high fevers, and violent dizziness. One man, according to the rumor, died within 2 weeks. Whether these symptoms came from environmental causes, contaminated water, heat stroke, or infection, was never clarified. But to the locals, the explanation was obvious. They had trespassed on forbidden ground. The idea of a curse gained traction when claims of inscriptions began to emerge. Some sources, never officially verified, described cuneiform markings found on walls or artifacts linked to the site. These writings allegedly warned of eternal guardians and a vessel not to be broken until the stars align once more. Such phrasing sounds dramatic, even mythical, but it mirrors language found in other Mesopotamian funerary texts. Priests and scribes often used celestial metaphors to speak of the balance between gods, mortals, and the afterlife. Even fragments of such admonitions from Gilgamesh's tomb would suffice to sustain within man both dread and wonder. Online legends proliferated in an enhanced manner. While the thought of a curse around Gilgamesh's tomb wholly captured the world's imagination, articles and videos now began making comparisons with the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt, where some considered the so-called curse of the pharaoh to have caused sudden deaths among many, including Lord Carnarvon, who entered that chamber. According to scientists later, the sudden deaths were possibly due to mold spores and bacteria. But the power of legend was not halted. The same way, Gilgamesh's curse was not fed with evidence or anything like that, but unexplained happenings, strange folklore, and the natural tendency of humankind to fear the unseen. Even the most seasoned researchers had to admit the power of such tales. Archaeologists may not be honest enough to admit to believing in curses, but they know how serious local folklores can become. Ignoring them could lead to loss of cooperation, trust, or maybe even safety. Sites being avoided by the locals send a message that has a significant weight beyond superstition. It becomes a practical reason to pause, and sometimes to stop altogether. And so, the tomb of Gilgamesh remained untouched, not because anyone could prove a curse was real, but because too many believed it might be. Yet even as this atmosphere of fear deepened, another explanation was about to surface. One that had nothing to do with spirits or incantations, but everything to do with modern conflict. And yet, the fear of curses is only part of the story. The politics of war added another chilling layer. War, secrecy, and lost access. The timing could not have been more uncanny. In early 2003, just as whispers of the Uruk scans reached the wider archaeological community, the Iraq War erupted. The German-led team that had uncovered the subterranean shapes beneath Uruk sands had little choice but to suspend operations. Foreign nationals fled the country for their safety, research was halted, and permits were revoked. What might have been the beginning of a historic excavation became instead the start of one of history's most enduring mysteries. The scans were real, the data existed, but the chance to confirm them evaporated overnight. As the war raged, the site faded from official records, but not from memory. The vacuum of information quickly became fertile ground for speculation. US military forces soon occupied southern Iraq, and reports circulated that checkpoints were placed near areas of archaeological significance. For many,